Grazie, Lisa. So good afternoon, and thank you for having me. And sorry I couldn't come to Venice and meet you all in person. I have a little cold, so it's not COVID. You're not going to get it from me. But I might have to stop for some strategic issues. Just to give a little background, I've started working on a material from Kvatskhelebi about 10 years ago within a whole other project. But when I came to realize how substantial the site is and how little of it was published and is understood, I have decided to take this project and bring together a group of people to study and publish the material from Kvatskhelebi, as I will show you. The material that I'm presenting today is actually just a small part of what we plan to do, and I will show you. Just to put us in context, so Kvatskhelebi is actually one of the best preserved Kura-Araxes settlements in the Shida Kartli region in Georgia, so that just puts us in place. And now for today, our mission is to see where we put ourselves in the very general time span of the Kura-Araxes period. So the site is located on the riverbank, just above the Kura River or the Mitkvari. It's on a flat hill or an extension separated by ravines, and the slope is pretty steep, as you can see. So it's a pretty small site of about 3,500 square meters, and it's roughly 630 meters above sea level. The top of the hill is rather flat, but it's also sloping, so the highest part is 636. And then it slopes a little, and then it's also about 30 meters above the river. So you see, this is an aerial photo from 1959, and here you can see the early part of the excavation, the first years of the excavations on top of the hill. And you can see that even today, so these guys are on the top of the site, and we're down looking from the river. It's a pretty steep slope. The excavations at the site were conducted by the Urbnisi Archaeological Project, which was a wider regional project headed by an expedition of the Janahi State Museum of Georgia and National Academy of Sciences, and the field directors at Kvatskhelebi were Alexander Javakhishvili and Lili Glonti, and part of the excavations and the results were published in 1962 in a report in Georgian with a Russian abstract. What you all know from the publication is basically this part of the excavations, whatever they excavated until 1960, and everything else, which you all know from the very famous plan of the settlement, was actually never properly published. So when I came to work on it, part of the reason I chose to work on Kvatskhelebi was because it was documented pretty well. We do have field diaries for most seasons. We have inventory books listing all the finds. We have most, but not all, the finds from the site at the National Museum in Tbilisi. We also have field plans and photos. So there's a lot to work with and to get information from. We started our project in 2014 with the aid of a White Levy grant in order, as I say, to study whatever we can and to bring everything to proper publication. And at the end of the presentation, I list all the lovely people from around the world that are part of our team. Just to give a quick survey of the situation or stratigraphic situation in Kvatskhelebi, we have about 40 structures or part of structures that were excavated and belong to between 4 to 6 stratigraphic phases. And I say between 4 to 6 because, as you will see, the situation is rather complicated, and it's not the same, it's not uniform throughout the site. But what is very special here and very substantial is the fact that stratum C1, the one that you see in red in this plan, was destroyed by a fierce conflagration, and it thus left us the most complete plan of the Kura-Araxes settlement with about 25, actually this is part of another one, mostly complete domestic buildings and hundreds of finds in situ. So the top levels, the upper levels were damaged quite severely by modern activity, by plowing, agricultural activity, and also by the late antiquity, early medieval layer that is on top of most part of the site, not all of it. And then we have the Kura-Araxes phases, which the excavators divided into 2 main strata, C and B. And in each strata, they identified 3 different phases. Actually, these 3 different phases that they identified in each stratum was only identified in this part of the site, in the northwestern part of the site where they initially excavated. Then, as we go along and it's getting bigger and wider, we don't find all 6 phases everywhere. In fact, C2 is only a little patch of a floor that was found around here under this building, and B2 and 3 seem to be kind of continuous dynamic situation of building and rebuilding and changing houses leading to B1. So I think when I'm showing you these plans, except for C1, I think none of them represent a real plan at a, that was necessarily the situation in a certain moment. That is to say that I think C3 and whatever we call C2 are, again, a dynamic development that led to the village of C1. In the earliest occupation, C3 built on virgin soil, we have only 4 houses that were identified, and the graves at the north edge of the settlement, on top of which some of the C1 houses were built. C1, because it was destroyed by fire, it really preserves us a good moment and a good plan. And then later on, it was rebuilt. We have pieces of houses of whatever we call B2 and 3, and the latest occupation, again, somewhat damaged from the later activities, B1, which was eventually abandoned. So our mission was to try and date as much as we can, but we actually started with something very simple. We started just by taking whatever we had and knew where it came from. And these are the first 3 samples in the list. That is the grains that come from the area of C1 building 1, some of which were previously dated by other researchers, and another sample of grains from C3 house, which we thought can give us the earliest occupation at the settlement. Then we decided to extend our database and add more dates. And I unfortunately cannot present you today any of these dates because between some of our team getting down with COVID and the postal services and then the Israeli customs holding our package hostage for weeks, we kind of got behind with working on these. But there is a rationale that I want to show you about the choosing of the samples. So the issue was not to rely on isolated samples and to have as many dates as we can to combine, to diminish the uncertainty and get a more tight and more accurate time span. And then try to determine the establishment of the settlement, the destruction of C1, and the resettlement and possibly final abandonment, which for the time being we can't. The material that we have available includes wood, grains, flax threads, animal bones, and human bones, but our preference is short-lived samples. So for now, we left wood outside of the samples. And we did select samples only from secure contexts that allow us to integrate the stratigraphic knowledge into the model. The problem is that there is some good material but missing information and some good information but missing finds. And then the later phase, the B1, was heavily disturbed and we don't have any secure context to give us the last phase that was abandoned. Having said that, the earliest phase of occupation, we did take charred grains of wheat. There was quite a substantial amount of grains in this house. And you see this house. This house was then topped by C1 house 13. So stratigraphically, it's underneath it. And then it gave us the earliest, supposedly the earliest date that we have for the occupation. But unfortunately, you see that the calibrated range does not give us any very specific time span. What it does give us is that we are, after 2900, way into the 2800s and onward. Then we decided to add dates that we still don't have from two graves. These two graves are the only ones that still have the material available. All the other skeletal remains, we have no idea where they are, but these ones we encountered a couple of years ago in the museum. So we are able to sample them and hopefully we will be able to present the dates. And the good thing with them is that we have very good stratigraphic relations because we know these graves are sealed by a C1 house, and also the graves themselves were very well sealed by stones. So whatever material comes from there, hopefully will give us better understanding of this phase. Then the destruction of stratum C1 is actually the most interesting thing. And for this purpose, we dated material, especially from this part, from the round building, C1 building 1, and the open area around it, which is quite important. And now we are going to add material also from other buildings. Why? Okay, so why did I emphasized also the open area, and remember it, I'll come back to it, just briefly to show you some material from C1 building 1. First of all, to show off, and second, to comfort Giulio that here too, we're in the later part of the Kura-Araxes period, and most of the pottery is plain, and you know it very well. So we do have decorated pottery, but also most of the pottery is quite plain. We have everything from miniature cups to normal cups and bowls, to big bowls and jars, to huge pithoi. We have some special vessels, portable hearths, lids. We have some pot stands, grinding tools. human and animal figurines and lithics, bone implements, arrowheads, everything, and these tiny little stands, miniature stands. And in addition to all these finds in this building, two important things from the buildings and nearby are notable. First of all, there is an entire skeleton of a deer that is articulated in this part of the building. You can see it here, the head, the body, the limbs, and some vessels were arranged around this deer. It's on the floor, it's not under the floor, it's not a burial. Then the other thing is this black patch here, which is actually a pile of barley sheaves that was found just outside the building. And this pile was first identified in a section that was excavated in the first season of excavation. So in the section, what they saw was alternating layers of burnt straw and clay, on top of which a huge pile of grains covered by straw. And they actually took all of it and brought it to the museum. Catherine Longford studied it. And what we see here, that these are not clean grains, but these are whole barley sheaves, complete with stalks and ears and spikelets and whatever, and chaff, and everything is there. And actually, this, we still haven't proceeded, but I actually brought you the original sketch because it's quite interesting to see in the section. They saw this pile of grains here, again here, and what you see across the entire area, across the entire trench, for about like 15 meters, is a layer of black burnt straw and grains. So it's going across the entire layer. And this entire area is the open area, okay, here between building 1 and the adjacent buildings. So the barley sheaves that I showed you, the first one was found here and taken out. This is the corner of building 1, it's inside a building. And then you see here another pile of barley grains. And then reportedly we have 2 more piles here, and here in the middle, there was a box full of pieces of charred chaff. So all of this area, and here everything was covered with burnt straw. So this entire area has relation to some harvest activity, bringing the material in, bringing the sheaves in, but before threshing and winnowing, or during threshing and winnowing, and possibly the deer that we see here is related to some sort of feast that is planned to take place, maybe some sort of a harvest festival. But then this whole thing caught fire and was burnt down. So, of course, my expectations were that we will have a very precise date, since, you know, we can say it's harvest time, so it's summer, you know, it's dry season. I can even say it was probably in the afternoon when we know there is a strong wind in the site and a lot of flammable material can catch fire very fast. But unfortunately, the dates that we got from these 2 piles of barley, these 3 C1 bars that you see here, did not give us a very accurate date. And again, you see that the calibration range is spread across quite a wide span. So that's the red dates here. Actually, one of them gave us slightly later dates, but Elisabetta can explain later maybe. But we ran this one 3 times, and Elisabetta ran this one only 1 time. And then the blue one is the C3, the earlier, supposedly earlier date, which we ran 4 times. And although stratigraphically this is earlier, what we see is that the dates are almost identical. And if we try hard, we might get a slightly earlier beginning for the C3. But in any case, we are, as I said, in the 2800s, 2700s, and not earlier than that. Putting our dates, I just want to compare it with dates that were previously retrieved from the same material, from this barley. It was published as C1 House 1, but in fact, it did not come from within the house, but from this pile that I showed you. So these are the dates published by Blonti and Palumbi, which for some reason came out. It was taken in Rome in the early 2000s, somehow came really off. But this is Anna Paula Passarini's date, and it came pretty much the same as our dates. And trying to model it is a bit tricky, as Elisabetta said, because we have very, very few dates. But because we know that the C3 is earlier, we try to plot it together and try to play with it a little bit. But it doesn't give us much. Like, even if we really, really try, what it gives us is that this specific C3 house could have existed maybe 20, 15 years earlier to the C1 that we have. Just to go back quickly to what we add now. So these are the dates that we have, 1 and 2 and 3 from this house. As I said, we're adding material from the graves to possibly find more material related to the earliest occupation. Then all the red numbers are from C1, hopefully. The deer is too burnt, so we cannot extract any collagen from it, but maybe we will be able to date it as charcoal, so we will see. We also add bones from this building, C1 House 4, and then recently we found more cereal grains together with thread, a bundle of burnt thread that is white and red flax fibers in the corner on the bench of this building here. So it will give us also a view of different places of this settlement at this phase. And then we have some B3 bones from B3 House 1, which is topped by B1 House 1. The problem with B1 is that it's disturbed, it's not sealed, it's not a destruction layer, and I cannot be 100% sure about the context of the material coming from B1 houses, and therefore, for the time being, we cannot date the abandonment of this village. So that's just very shortly, and I'm sure Elisabetta can answer more questions about the dates. And thank you, and thank you to our lovely team, to Catherine Longford, who did the botanical identification, Nika Vanishvili, who is doing the zoological analysis, and Eliso Kvatskhelebi and Maya Chichinadze, who are doing the palynological, and also all the flax textile threads that we have were identified by them, and everybody else that is listed here. And thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions for me, for Elisabetta, Mindia, we're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarit.